The temperature anomalies averaged over the past 14 days in degrees centigrade for both Europe and North America. You can see how both of them have been below average overall by about 1 to 2 degrees Celsius, which translates to about 1.8 to 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit. I predicted this about 2 to 3 weeks ago when I said that the pattern would change to a colder and snowier pattern between January 10th and January 20th, and sure enough I was right and the pattern did change. We have been locked in a colder pattern in these same areas as I predicted, despite warm-ups every week or so. Now keep in mind that these are the 14-day average temperature anomalies. So 7 to 14 days ago was when we were transitioning into a colder pattern. So the past 7 days have actually been colder than this on the maps. But I just showed you that there's still a trough over Europe, and there's still a trough over eastern North America. Now, looking a bit closer at North America, I want to direct your attention to the jet pattern. Notice how the jet pattern goes like this. There's a strong ridging in the west over Alaska and western Canada and the western United States, and there's a big area of high pressure over the North Pacific and Gulf of Alaska. And what that's doing is compressing the air towards the sea surface, and that's causing high pressure to form, and sea surface temperatures start to warm up. And that causes the jet stream to go up into Alaska, bringing warmer than average temperatures there. Then it starts to bring in the cold air down out of Canada as the jet stream plunges south towards the Gulf of Mexico. Now, contrary to the overall cold pattern over North America and Europe persisting since mid-January, we have seen weekly warm-ups. We've been cold for a few days, then we get warm, and then we get cold again, and that's only if you're on the east coast of the U.S. If you live in the Midwest and Great Plains, then you haven't seen as much warm-up like this. But across the eastern half of the United States, you have seen some weekly warm-ups. And even for those of you in the Western Europe, you all have also seen some temperature roller coasters as well. So the reason that we are seeing briefer cold shots, and with that, mild warm-ups after that, with a moderation in temperatures, especially over the eastern U.S. and western Europe, is solely because one of our teleconnections is not in favor of a persistently cold and snowy pattern over North America and in parts of Europe. Now, while we clearly have a negative Eastern Pacific Oscillation, a positive PNA, and a negative Arctic Oscillation, the North Atlantic Oscillation, or NAO, on the other hand, is essentially neutral. Now, I'm sure many weather geeks out there like myself have looked at the teleconnection charts, and they do show that NAO is negative. The reason that the charts show that the NAO is negative is because they see this North Atlantic ridge. And the ridge is right over the North Atlantic. It's in between Iceland and the United Kingdom. So it technically counts as a negative North Atlantic oscillation, but because the ridge is not right over southern Greenland, and because it's not bigger in general, it does not really act like a typical negative North Atlantic oscillation. When it's doing this like it is right now, it's essentially neutral. So while we may have all of our other teleconnections in favor of a snowstorm or an East Coast snowstorm or an Arctic outbreak on the East Coast, the Midwest and Great Plains get it. Eastern Europe gets it, but Western Europe and the East Coast don't get it because the North Atlantic oscillation is not in favor. Now, because of this screwed up North Atlantic ridge, another ridge forms over the Western Atlantic, which happens to be right along the East Coast. So this high pressure is driving in warm air from the Gulf in its clockwise rotation. So that's driving in warm air from the Gulf every few days after a cold air comes plunging south. And any of the storm systems, which would typically go off the coast and bomb out and become a nor'easter, they get shoved inland. So all the cold air locked in west of the Appalachian Mountains, Midwest, interior New England, everybody over there gets heavy snow, while people from Boston to D.C., we just see rain or ice transition over to rain. And the warm front pushes north. That's just how the pattern is. I don't like this current pattern. I like it being cold in general, but I don't like these weekly warm-ups. It's getting irritating to see the temperature roller coaster. I just want it to stay cold and snowy, but it's just the way the weather's working. Nothing you can do about it, but it's just the way it is. Now, things are going to change a little bit around here as we head into next week, as the polar vortex makes another return. And this shot of cold air will last a bit longer than the Martin Luther King Jr. Day polar vortex Arctic outbreak. This animation is the height anomalies of the air pressures, and you don't need to know all the details about it, but you can see how there's a big area of blue and green and purple that comes rushing out of Canada. That is very cold air. And with that cold air is very cold, is possibly daily, is record-breaking temperatures in terms of record cold. Many places will see daily records broken. Look at Cleveland, -4, Detroit at -12, Indianapolis at -1, Des Moines, Iowa at -30, same thing for Milwaukee, and in Minneapolis at -33. So daily records could be broken next Wednesday morning, which is going to be the coldest day for everybody. Now look at Chicago, -26 degrees Fahrenheit. That is only 1 degree off the record low of -27, which was set back in 1985. That was the coldest temperature ever measured in Chicago. This is the GFS model. The European model, which I can't legally post maps of, it shows -34 degrees, which would break the all-time record. So Chicago does have a chance of seeing a record-breaking low temperature for next Wednesday morning, and an all-time temperature as well. So, and in this here's the same map for the same time. This is for the Great Plains. Look at the brutally cold air in North Dakota. That's not record-setting cold. Maybe a daily record here and there, but it's not. It's nothing impressive. It's still very cold. It's a lot colder than we've seen in the past few years. But just keep in mind they see this quite often. Now, what's interesting here though is look at these temperature anomalies. This map is pretty darn awesome. This is the GFS model. This is the temperature anomalies Wednesday morning. Temperatures in the center of this cold, all of this stuff's cold. Temperature anomalies in here are about 40 to 50 degrees below average. In some places, isolated spots could see temperatures as low as 60 degrees below normal, so that's very impressive. Now, the last thing I want to bring your attention to is that there is a snowstorm, not necessarily a large one.